People suck, and that's my contention. I can prove it on scratch paper and a pen. Give me a fucking Etch-a-Sketch. I'll do it in 3 minutes. The proof, the fact, the factorum. I'll show my work. Case closed. Tired of this backslapping aren't humanity neat bullshit. We're a virus with shoes, okay? That's all we are.
If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma, and joining me I have Her Holiness, the Reverend Tracy. How are you doing?
Oh, you know, it's that magical time of the year where half of us get croupy coughs the entire time. So, if I've got a good, sexy, low jazz voice, that is why. How are you doing this week, Tim?
Well, I can't beat that. I mean, maybe it was some forgotten dream of mine to be able to sing Betty Davis Eyes at some point, but I don't have that type of voice. So if you have that type of voice, go for it, damn it. You've been dealing with sickness, and I've been dealing with responding to challenges that have come my way.
Oh, really? Do tell more.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Professor Aubrey had the gall to challenge me to a trivia contest where if she beats me, I have to watch The Princess Bride, and I had to respond accordingly.
Ooh, I might have to get out my clergy hat for this one. That's a pretty exciting bit of news because I know I have shamed you a little bit about Princess Bride, including the very first episode I was in. I landed 2 or 3 jokes that just went right over your head. It was beautiful.
Way over.
Yep, and I got to be there in person because it was, the before times. So yes. I got to see them go over your head physically.
So this Thanksgiving, for folks that don't know yet, we are going to have a very special episode. It's called No Chance in Hell. And it's going to be a trivia contest between me and Aubrey, Professor Aubrey. So tune in this Thanksgiving, and after I soundly beat her in the trivia contest, she is going to get a pie in the face. That's what happens if she loses.
Okay, so she gets a pie in the face, and you have to watch the best movie that you refuse to watch for no good reason. I
have very good reasons, and I explained it in the response episode, so listen to that, folks, if you haven't already. Definitely proud of that. But how about I start off with what I've been nerding out about this week?
Yeah, what have you been nerding out about this week?
All right, well, one thing I'm always going to nerd out about is receiving free stuff. And what happened is we had a gentleman by the name of Ryan Little, who's based out of Pittsburgh, reach out to me via Twitter, and he let me know that he has a comic book that he has created that has a Kickstarter campaign going on. It's called Super Scouts. And he asked me to read it, say a few words, and if I liked it, then use our platform to share his link. So, I'll say ahead of time so we don't have to talk about it later. Go to our Linktree link, and you'll find the link to his Kickstarter there. It'll also be in the show description as well. But it's Super Scouts. Basically, the premise is he takes the Galaxy Quest idea, and instead of using Star Trek, he uses the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And it's got a good, fun, humorous, fast-paced tone, so it's not going to be one you have to, like an Alan Moore comic, like with Watchmen, where you got to inspect every single panel to see little clues to the story. It's just very much like if it were a movie, it'd be like a popcorn movie, like Vin Diesel would probably star in it or something like that. It does have some adult humor. One of the adult Power Rangers turned into a porn star, so there is that.
Well, that's definitely a little bit of a off from what I was used to as a kid.
Yeah, so...
the pink Power Ranger never had a pink thong, at least not on screen.
Not on screen. Maybe in, satire videos, but that's a different story. The art on the comic, I when I first started reviewing comics, the first bit of advice I ever got was if you're going to review a comic book, don't review just the story. You have to review the art as well, because it's a marriage of two forms of art here. And the art I kind of dug. It was kind of a neat little marriage of anime and classic 60s comic book style, mainly the Jack Kirby influence together, which really brought me more into the story because it had that familiar feel. So he does mention with this comic, he made a big point on his Kickstarter page to point out that the production on this comic is already done. The point of the Kickstarter is to raise funds to be able to print it and sell it, to the public, which I love that he did that, because Kickstarter has had problems, even with some big name people, of having fundraisers that promise gifts, based on the completion of work, and then people would collect the money, but then never complete the work and give out the bonuses to the people that paid for it. So the fact that he mentioned that this project is already done and that this is simply raising money for printing and distribution, I'm glad that he pointed that out. I wouldn't be honest with people if I didn't mention something, a critique. And the big critique I have is this. It is 3 issues, and I get probably, economics-wise, it probably costs them a lot less to print up 3 issues than more, but I do think the one critique I would have would be that, similar to Galaxy Quest, you have to be able to set up these characters in a way that, the casual person can understand. When it comes to Galaxy Quest, the beauty of that is that you didn't have to know anything about Star Trek going in. Now, if you were a Star Trek fan, yes, you're gonna, have a lot of fun with a lot of the things that you see on screen. Tim Allen's performance definitely is a playoff of William Shatner. Alan Rickman was a playoff of Leonard Nimoy. We don't get that as much in this comic. So it's not a bad critique. It's a critique of, I wish there was more character introduction, because as it reads, as someone who's not that familiar with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, it felt a little distant to the story. And I think that if there were people that enjoy that show, they would probably get a little bit more out of it, which is a disservice to the casual reader. So if I do offer one critique, it would be, give us more, have 3 more issues with the backstory later on or something like that. But overall, definitely recommend it. I'm not going to go out and say it's the greatest comic ever. He's not paying us for this review. It's a nice, solid comic, and especially in these times, it being the Corona time, anything we can do to support artists, I'm going to support. So definitely check out the Kickstarter link for information on how you can support it. And like I said, Super Scouts is a really solid story. Definitely recommend it. Next week, I will have another comic review, because I had a friend of the show, Nick Marino. I think I may have told you about one of the comics he wrote. Do you remember I talked to you about the comic called Holy Fuck?
Oh, yes, I think I do recall that, but I'm sure you'll kind of summarize for other people who don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was a story about Jesus and Satan. They're a couple, and they end up having a baby, and it's about people that are trying to harm that baby and all that stuff. He also wrote a sequel to that called Holy Fucked, which even better, and he had another comic that we actually reviewed. He was the first celebrity guest that we had on the show here. He had a comic called Cougar and Cub. The premise of that is that one day he was thinking, what if Batman and Robin fucked? And then Cougar and Cub came along.
Yes, because all the best ideas for comics came from, what if this character and this character fucked and had a baby? But I love that as a descriptor of the comic.
Well, that's what he said. That was his description of it. So, he reached out to me and said he has a new work he wanted my thoughts on. So I will be back next week with thoughts on Nick Marino's new work. So that's really all I got to say about that. What have you been nerding out about this week?
Well, this week, around being sick, I like many, many people in Portland last week, I got my voter's ballot in the mail. So for me, a lot of my time has been spent figuring out just what I'm going to do with that. And I know we get a lot of information this time of year, and a lot of my friends have expressed a lot of anxiety and just kind of feeling overwhelmed about how to even begin going through it all. So like I discussed with you, I just kind of wanted to hit, this is a little bit of a my humble opinion style bit here that I'm going to go through, but just a way to kind of think about it this time of year, how to go through this information and not feel crazy, and also maybe not just having messages marketed at you. But I will get at that. So have you turned yours in? Have you looked at anything yet, Tim?
Yes, the ballots came in this week. They ended up spelling my name wrong, but that's more due to my handwriting. You may have seen my handwriting before, and it's garbage. But it's
atrocious.
Yeah, they thought my last name, I spelled it Jousing, Jousing. So I had to call up the election board to find out what they said, and they told me to just complete the ballot, put it in, and then after the election call, and then make the switch over at that particular time. But I definitely voted for Biden, voted for Sarah Inero, I believe her name is, for mayor.
Yeah. I liked her a lot, and I wasn't going to go into so much like specific candidates, more like how to go over the information we're going to get. I know for a little while there I had to take a complete cold turkey break from politics because it was just way too much. And personally, I've found a lot of calm in the realization that, like many other areas of our world, politics has gotten into a lot of marketing type behavior, and that's where we've seen a huge trend over the years. You know, it's been more, and in marketing itself has changed in trends in the last few decades to where it's been less informative and more manipulative. So unfortunately, all marketing kind of moved that way. So first of all, I guess I wanted to go into knowing your political mailers, because we've gotten ballots, we've gotten pamphlets, we've gotten scratchy, offy style informative things and other things talking about a dozen ballot measures and why you should totally love them. So going through these, I've kind of put them into three categories. So if you're getting stuff in your mail, okay, this is stuff being sent to you. So some of it might be marketing to you. And personally, when I feel marketed towards, that's when my skepticals immediately come up. For any Gravity Falls fans out there, yes, that is supposed to be the Mabelism, skepticals. So knowing your political mailers, so basically you have manipulative, informative, and official. Manipulative, you can usually figure this out pretty quick. There was one, and I'm going to do my best. I don't want to name any names. I don't want to name any action committees, because I don't want to tell anybody what to think about anything. But there was one that came from a certain group that you had to answer these asinine questions. And it's like, do you want to tax poor people, or would you rather it come from somewhere reasonable? If the answer is yes, you want to tax poor people, then by all means vote for this measure. And then if you go and look into it, you find out that's not really what it's talking about doing, et cetera, and so forth. So if you've got something where it's asking you those kind of leading questions, it almost seems like a no-brainer and everything enters to either yes or no, that's somebody kind of manipulating you.
Kind of?
It's kind of playing on that good behavior, right? Because we don't want to do bad things to people. And unfortunately, marketing campaigns also know that most people don't want to do bad things. So anytime you see that kind of emotional play on something like that, just go ahead and look who's funding it. And if you feel like looking into that, or just go and look into the measure itself, which we'll get into that in a minute. The second type is informative. And these are like flyers that come off, and it's usually pretty positive. It's usually like, vote yes on this, vote yes on this, vote yes on this, and vote yes on this. It's a lot of measure changes, and I do appreciate them, because is it still marketing? Yes. But are they at least trying to be informative? Yes. It's not any tricky questions that's going to make you feel bad for voting another way.
Right.
It doesn't say, if you vote no, you're taking food out of the mouths of orphans. Okay, so that's your informative type. A lot calmer, a lot easier to read. And then lastly, you have official, and this is really the voter's pamphlet. And this I had a lot of fun going through, because, oh my, do we have some characters that are running this year.
All right.
Locally. Because, it took me about 3 seconds to vote federally. I spend most of my time locally because if you don't know that, I strongly suggest looking. Like there's so much out there on how voting works that explains why it's so important to vote at every opportunity and why it's so important to really almost nitpick locally and be selective and don't like just vote by party. So I think of the voters pamphlet as an opportunity, and this is very humble opinion. Everybody's going to take what they want out of the voters pamphlet, but hear me out. To me, this is the candidate's chance to put a resume in front of me saying, this is why I would like this job. And for me personally, if anybody treats it as anything other than that, I kind of check out. And so we get into another little quick side of topics. You've got your ranting mad person.
I wonder who that is.
Well, there was one of the senators that I thought was hilarious, but I'm not going to name drop. But if I were to describe these types of things, it's usually blocky and paragraphy, usually very angry. It's usually calling out specific people or parties and saying that they just won't help you. It sounds a lot like a very angry man wrote it in the basement of his parents' house.
His ladybugs were tickled.
Which one?
His ladybugs were tickled. Lindsey Graham reference.
No, but there was one particularly that very, very much felt like that. And then the extra greatness, though, with one of them was it really looks like he didn't have a photo to submit. So maybe he stopped by, like, maybe a convenience store that he wasn't allowed in anymore and just ripped it off the wall. Because it's like T-shirt, disheveled, kind of almost a stage of Gary Busey as he went downhill.
Hey, vote for me!
So, I mean, obviously, if they're just ranting and mad, just look, if you read it, you'll see that they're not actually sharing anything on what they're going to do. The other thing that I look for in those two is you'll see it's like, I have the answer to this. And it's like an implied holding it hostage unless you vote for them. And I'm like, meh. There's the other type that I find common in these pamphlets that I call list of friend quotes. And if you look, it might have their background, it might have some of the stuff they do and some of their community involvement, and that's great, but it'll have no plans, but it'll have a lot of kudos from people who like them. And I think the only time that I find that acceptable for these pamphlets is when it's going for a judge. Because you can't really say like a lot of policy you're going to put in place as a judge, right? Like,
right.
You're judging. So, okay, I get that. That's a little bit more referral based. But for everybody else, I would rather go and read who's endorsing you like outside of it and what people have to say outside. This is your resume. I want to read what you're going to do. If I want to know what people have to say about you, that's the next step. That's just like with a job interview type thing.
That's what your website's for, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what you put references for, and for me it would be going to their website, and there's where I can see Susan so-and-so is super. Like, she'll do good and stuff okay. But as far as in these pamphlets, I don't find it helpful because the point is that you should be able to go through these and make a somewhat logical decision on how you would like to vote. And to me, if you're going to submit something that gives me nothing, you're not going to get my vote.
Right.
And then the last one, which is the one I respect, is the actual plans and thoughts. They'll usually have a list of what they've done. You'll usually see like past involvement, if not actually in the community, politically, stuff like that. They will have a list of items they want to focus on and ideas and maybe even something of how they want to fix some things. And you can usually find these because they're bullet pointed. Like they know how to write a good resume, chunk it together, people read it quick.
Nice.
Yeah, but so general advice is the information you're taking in, was it brought to you by a reliable source? Was it something that you sought out, or was it marketed at you? Because again, if something was marketed at you guys, just take a second and think about it. Like, don't blindly drink the Kool-Aid just because it showed up in your inbox. There's no need for that nowadays. You have pocket computers. I famously call it my stunt brain. Like, you have the ability to check trusted resources too, even if you're not sure where it came from. Be aware of emotional pooling. There's a really great quote I found from Claire Wardell of First Draft, and I guess this is an organization that's helping journalists tackle a lot of the misinformation problem. Fear is one of the biggest drivers that allows misinformation to thrive. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to playing off of that human nature that you want to help, because when we hear really bad news, we want to let our friends know, our neighbors know, everybody. So again, if it's either making you overly sad, fearful, angry, or shit, even happy, skepticals.
Yes.
Super don't be afraid, because like I've said in this show probably ad nauseum in one episode, you're allowed to go read other opinions and still maintain what you think. Just don't be afraid to challenge it. And then lastly, if you guys want bigger changes, please vote every year. Please vote every year that it's available. Again, these local elections really do make big changes over time. And please don't straight ticket vote, because fun side note, random nerdy thing, I found out they got rid of that in good old Texas.
I saw you posted that link on Facebook today, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big move, because I guess Oregon doesn't have it, but for those that aren't aware, straight ticket vote, obviously, straight red, straight blue. Texas had a little one-punch option back in the day, but finally getting rid of that. But I do strongly discourage, like, doing that in general, like, even if you're personally filling out. Be open. There is good and shit on both sides. And hey, if I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't vote straight one way.
And that's fine. I mean, because at the end of we've talked about on this show before, we can't have, it is a marketing tool in and of itself. We cannot have this us versus them mindset. We're both progressive leaning, but we both recognize that not all problems in the world can be solved with progressive ideas. Sometimes the conservative ideas are the right ideas at the right time in history, and sometimes both sides need to get together to come to a compromise that will satisfy both people. We're not going to ever have a situation, and we should never have, for the health of this country, a situation where either political party has so much power that they essentially get to rubber stamp everything, because somebody's going to be left in the dust at some point. And I'm probably not speaking like a good socialist or anything like that, but I do think that there needs to be a balance between supporting the capitalist side of things with major corporations, as well as satisfying the employees, satisfying the consumers. You gotta have that balance, which we're not having right now. And to marketing as well, watch out where you get your news too, because the major news organizations, they're there to make a profit, and they know that if they're trying to reach certain advertisers, if they talk about story X but not story Y, they're going to get more money. So just be very, very skeptical, and also look for opposing views, because there are good, people with integrity out there that are, in my case, a conservative, that you can still listen to hear what they say and support them. That is one way to kind of destroy this us versus them mentality. Because that's the big problem I see. I even see it on the Democrat side of like a lot of the Bernie supporters. I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden because he's not Bernie. Why? With what we're facing right now, what could potentially happen? Do you want another 4 years of this?
Yes.
It's anyway.
No, I don't. I wasn't saying yes to that.
Well, I got your point. Yeah. There's a surprise for the show.
By the way, and if we want to change that, because yes, anybody who follows politics will tell you, like, sure, there's multiple parties listed there, but it's gonna be one of two parties that's gonna win.
Yep.
And it goes right back. If you guys want to see that change, you have to vote more often than every 4 years.
Each and every
election. It's so important. Yes, every chance. Make sure that, you've got your address and stuff updated for special elections, stuff like that. And more to the thing of coming in the middle here, both sides need to be willing to compromise somewhere and be willing to open. Because if you're not willing to compromise anywhere or be open to listen to anything, why the hell should they? So if you're going into it with that attitude, and if you think that vibe can't be picked up on in a conversation, because come on, we've all been in the conversation with that person where you can tell they have no interest in having a conversation. They just want to tell you how they think you should vote.
I got relatives, yeah.
I have a dad I don't talk to anymore.
Oh, cool, yeah.
So yes, people, please vote more often. We can do this. We can change stuff. Because, I would love to see it where, like, a Green Party candidate could actually be on the debate stage. Which, speaking of that, hey, this is that night that's going on. I caught that old mic thing, and that was going pretty okay. But a really good, solid quote from Joe that I got before I unplugged to come here was, I don't see red and blue states. I see the United States.
There was a little bit of a delay in a glitch in the computer here, so it sent it. So it was an awesome delay though. It was like when you said United, it was like auto-tuned. United.
United.
Yeah, so you can be like Lady Gaga.
I need an auto-tune.
All right. What a good segue here with the laughing. Let's go to the newly named segment, the Nerdy Five. Yay! This week, we are going to talk about our 5 favorite comedy albums. In your research this week, what have you found interesting? Just kind of overall thoughts. Do you think your opinions have changed?
Oh, I mean, no, because these are ones that I would still listen to today. I mean, I'm totally stammering over this. So it's hard to talk about it because one of them on my list, and I know I kind of discussed this with you before, technically got canceled. But this person had a lot of influence on a lot of comics, including myself doing stand-up and getting into any sort of improv or anything. I do have an all-time favorite, which I don't know if anybody's actually heard of this person, and I'm always excited to share like comic talent that nobody's heard of. And I've got a nice little kind of array of things here. But excited to share because comedy's great. And hey, if we're all kind of going to end up staying in a little bit more lately because cold and flu season, we could all use some laughs. But what did you find in looking up and searching yourself?
Well, me, I tend to like people that say fuck a lot. There's that.
So George Carlin, right?
He's definitely on the list.
I actually did not cheat and look either.
Yeah. Overall, because I had some titles that I was initially going to put on the list that ultimately I ended up taking off just thinking, because when I put the list together initially, it was just more, like contemporary, like spontaneous, I'm going to come up with this list now and then research them later. And then the more I researched and listened to the album again, like Andrew Dice Clay's first album, it's just like, this didn't age so well, and I don't think I should necessarily try and talk about this one. This is not a sword I'm going to fall on. But the ones that I did choose here are ones that, for, the times that I am funny, it's thanks to people like this that have done it. So we'll go like we usually do, back and forth. Did you want to start, or should I start?
I could go ahead and start if you want.
Sure. What's your first one?
So my first one is, I'm actually going to start with my favorite for once instead of leaning up. This is my all-time favorite. I've listened to it so many times in a row, and it is called Coke Money by Natasha Leggero. Have you ever heard of Natasha Leggero?
Yes. Actually, I haven't heard much from her, but her and her husband had a Netflix special, the honeymoon special. It was like 2 episodes. One was her, and she was pregnant and funny, and the other one was her husband. I've also seen another period show she does on Comedy Central. It's like it's like a reality show set in like 1900, and it's funny as hell.
I've seen snippets of that. I haven't seen that. I do think she's awesomely talented. In other words, she also has shown up. She went on a historic roast. Oh. I'm trying to remember. Did she play Abraham's wife? I think Abraham Lincoln. I can't remember.
I didn't. I only saw a couple of episodes of that. I was excited at first because I love Jeffrey Ross and I love roast humor, but it just too many non-comics were involved for me to really like it.
Oh, the Lincoln one was good though. It had Bob Saget and
well, he's always going to be funny.
What's his name from Full House?
John Stamos.
Yeah, John Stamos, and then it's Natasha Leggero. She played the wife. And then the other good one from Historical Roast, total segue while we're talking about Historical Roast, that's worth watching is the Anne Frank one. That one was really good because it has Gilbert Gottfried, and she has the best ending line about picking him, and it's so good, I will let her deliver it to your ears.
Oh my God.
Anywho, Coke Money by Natasha Leggero. I love her. She plays kind of this snotty character in a way that's very uppity and rich. Like, she's like, did you hear we're running out of diamonds? The only way I know how to get a diamond is jerking off an old man. And so she kind of plays this thing, and she even has like one joke in there, and I really appreciate somebody that can land a joke that they knew the crowd didn't like and then make fun of the crowd for the fact that she did it. Like, there's this one joke where the punchline is, and that's how you get poor people. And everybody's like, ooh, I knew you wouldn't like that one, but I did it anyway. Yeah. And it was beautiful. Like, and then she even interacts with the audience at the end and does something really kind of funny. I just think she's great overall. And if you haven't heard of her, check her out across the board, but especially listen to Coke Money. I know it's on YouTube. I had a friend that was around that came to hang out for just a little bit, and we wound up watching that together, and we all really enjoyed it.
Nice. All right, my first one. It's a classic. I consider this a masterpiece. If I'm going to have a Mount Rushmore of comedy albums, this is on it. It's Have You Seen Me Lately from Sam Kinison. Have you heard that?
No.
It is an 80s I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with his delivery style, right? With the screaming, the oh type of deal. Okay. Just yeah, it's overall it's a really good album. Like when he makes jokes about Jesus never being married because what wife would believe the resurrection? It's like on Friday he leaves with 12 of his friends, shows back up on Sunday disheveled and everything like that. And she's like, "Where have you been?"
I think I've heard that joke, actually. Like, maybe it's just a separate thing. I think that's come across my ears because that sounds familiar.
Yeah, that was really funny. He has this great one at the end. He calls it Parties with the Dead, and he describes a time where a friend of his was talking about an article that he read that said that he was like, nobody can do anything. You cannot make a joke out of this. And apparently Sam said, give the article to me. And it was an article about homosexual necrophiliacs that would pay morticians to have sex with the freshest male corpses. And what he thought was, imagine being that corpse. You're lying there, face down. You're like, oh, I'm dead now. Life's over. I get to go up and be with you. Wait a minute. There's a guy fucking my ass. It never ends. It never ends. So, your face
I know
is
I look
priceless.
mortified because I am. There's part of me that's like, it's almost a shame this video is not up anywhere. But anyway,
yeah.
So yeah, there's that album.
There's well, there's one more thing on it. This is the album that his song Wild Thing was on, and I love Wild Thing so much. It is really the perfect encapsulation of like men's anger when they go through a breakup, and it's just beautiful and fucking amazing. So anyway, what's your next one?
So my next one, I'm going to go ahead and get my controversial one out of the way.
Okay.
And that's because this is probably one of the first comedians I really enjoyed. I was kind of gutted and pissed off when things happened. So Hilarious by Louis C.K. I really like it. I especially love the beginning because he actually had a really good point in the beginning. And earlier on into it, he talks about, well, I'm getting divorced. And everybody goes, aw. And he goes, cut the aw shit, like a puppy died. Like, no good marriage ends in divorce. So I really liked that joke. Like, especially, I came from a divorced household and, I wound up getting divorced later.
Yeah,
but
join the club.
But starting there, and then I also loved, like, he's dark, but he also jokes, very lovingly about his daughters. There's, like, stuff about him being a single dad with them that's, like, super relatable, but also just really fucking hilarious. So if you haven't heard it, I'm sure it's still up somewhere to listen to for free. I don't think it got taken down anywhere. I get it if you don't want to give him money. I'm not saying go buy it. I am saying good album to listen to, even just for once. He's one of the first comedians I really kind of fell in love with, like, as a comedian, and how he is on stage and how he presents on stage. And I always really appreciated that. And he was like, whenever I went to an improv workshop with some of the fellas from Second City back when I lived in Phoenix. And I remember one of them actually referencing Louis C.K. and saying, like, please don't think you're Louis C.K. famous and ever try to say the N-word. That just, no. No.
Yeah.
So he was actually famous for that for a while, but there was also, like, that joke and how he approached it, which is funny in its own way. The whole "you're making me think it" when you say it. Yeah. But anywho, so personally, worth listening to once. I'm not saying you have to forgive and forget, but good album.
And that's the thing too. You can't deny the impact that somebody's had, because I mean, Louis C.K., his work on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, revolutionary for comedy. He did work on the Dana Carvey show, which people are like, the Dana Carvey show. That was a canceled variety show that Dana Carvey had on ABC that was actually pretty revolutionary for its day. And it had people like, what was his name? Charlie Kaufman as a writer who wrote Being John Malkovich. It had two people in their very first TV roles that you may have heard of, called Stephen Colbert and Steve Carell. And it had Robert Schmeigel do some work on the show. He did some of the, that's where the TV Funhouse cartoons came. But Louis C.K.'s influence on comedy cannot be understated. But you also can't deny what he did as well. So
yes.
So yeah, if people are hesitant on wanting to support him, because in my opinion he hasn't really showed that much remorse for what he did, just the fact that he got caught, that's going to be on you. That's a personal choice. It's not a concerted campaign or anything like that.
I kind of loop it with the Michael Jackson thing. There are people that feel very strongly on both sides of it, and that's up to you. That is totally up to you. I don't judge either way. I just asked, maybe don't judge me. I don't go and I haven't bought anything from anybody in forever, to be totally fair.
Right.
I tend to buy more from local, like smaller people trying to, get up there versus the ones that actually do really well. But yeah, like if you take Louis C.K., if you canceled everything he did, you'd be missing a lot of content. The invention of lying, because if you didn't catch that he was in that, he is. He was also originally in the final episodes of Gravity Falls. But Disney did end up taking him out, and the actual one of the writers just revoiced. But you can tell, by the way, that the giant head with a hand out of it, like it's Louis C.K.'s face. Like you can tell that was based off of him. Yeah. But they didn't redraw it, but they did revoice it. But
he also wrote Pootie Tang. Can't forget that.
Oh yeah, Pootie Tang. That's American treasure that is. Anyway, you're number 2, I guess.
What a great segue. We already mentioned him, George Carlin. It's Class Clown from '72. One reason I like it is that I didn't know had a word. Bilabial fricative is the name of that sound. And that, I learned that from that album. And yeah, the other thing that this album is famous for is the 7 words you can't say on television: shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. I love the delivery that, in the English language, there's over 300,000 words, but 7 are bad. Ooh. And
yes, it's classic.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, everybody's heard it, so, you don't need me, pretending to be George Carlin or anything like that. But the one thing I've always loved about him is that he's such a student of language. And just by being a student of language and presenting the material the way he did, I mean, he made us as the audience really think, in terms of, because he challenged a lot of norms that, people in the audience go in with, that, again, anybody that can make you think is, in a positive way, is good for me. Another thing about Carlin that I loved and respected from him, that, speaking of Louis C.K. also does, is that George Carlin never had like one greatest hits set list that he would go around. Every year he wrote and created new material. And I really respect that. He wasn't like a Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld these days is a little different, I guess. But there are, like, Jeff Foxworthy is probably the best example. If you saw Jeff Foxworthy in concert today, he's giving essentially the same performance with a couple new things thrown in that he gave in the 90s.
You might be a redneck if...
Yeah, I mean, funny the first couple times you hear it, but the 9,000th time, it's a little too much. But the fact that, he had so much classic material from the 60s till, when he passed away. I mean, not many comics have that type of staying power. So, George Carlin, Class Clown.
I did feel he got kind of ranty and angry more in the end. I didn't like his later albums, like, near the end. But I do recall I liked a lot of his earlier stuff. And my dad was actually a fan, so I remember my father actually referencing George Carlin quite a bit as a kid.
I'm glad you mentioned that, too, because I noticed that the older I get, the more I can relate to his anger, because I think it's just a lot, especially with the coronavirus thing, just seeing how stupid people can be. And just, I can relate. I can relate. What's your next one?
I kind of wish, I wish he had been around when with the current president. Like, could you imagine what he would be writing and saying about what is going on right now with, I mean, he pulled no punches when he talked about an issue, especially social issues if he had any troubles with, or any issues with anybody in the government. Like, I appreciated that about George Carlin. You're going to get what he feels about it, and he'll still make it funny.
Yep. All right. What's your next one?
So my next one is more of the classics, and I was super bummed because I got into comedy after this wonderful, wonderful, brilliant comic passed away. Strategic Grill Locations by Mitch Hedberg. And I love Mitch Hedberg. Like I said, super bummed. I was like, wait, he's dead? Like, yeah, it was major buzzkill. But I love this one. This is the one where he does Smokey the Bear and Smacky the Frog.
Okay. I never heard
Are you familiar with that? Oh my gosh, he
basically
basically talks about, like, so he starts talking about, like, going out into the woods and stuff and doing drugs and stuff. And he was like, in the woods, you don't run into police, but you will run into bears, and bears are mean. And it's just the way he delivers the whole bit. And then he goes into, like, just how, bears are scary and, why is this our mascot? But then he goes into other mascots and starts talking about, and I forget where it was, but somewhere else has Smacky the Frog, and he compares the two. It's like, never in my life have I seen a frog come towards me and go, oh my God, a frog, I better play dead. It's more like, oh my God, frog, all right, perhaps I will catch him and put him in a mayonnaise jar with a stick and a like, it's just the way he delivers is amazing. And granted, yeah, it totally sounds like he's high the entire time, but he always remembered his sets, so I was okay with that.
There you go. Like I mentioned, I haven't heard him before. I've heard that he has some. He was influenced by the last comedian that I'll mention on my list, and I guess we can go to at that point. But everybody that I've heard that likes him, has nothing but great things to say about him. So maybe one day I'll check him out. I don't know.
Oh, please do. I highly recommend checking out Mitch Hedberg. Even if you just go get his latest hits, or not the latest, not any, but
too soon.
Spoiler alert. But at least checking out, like, that Smacky the Frog bit. I may have to send that one to you because that one's great.
Okay.
His delivery is great. You will never mistake him for anybody else.
All right. Let's go on to my next one here. It's another classic, and it's essentially a soundtrack album of a concert film from Richard Pryor, Live on the Sunset Strip. You ever hear that one?
Yes, I love Richard Pryor, but you go ahead.
Yeah, he is... The man was a genius. I mean, the fact that, he has in his... This happened after he accidentally set himself on fire when he was freebasing cocaine. And the end of the show was like him, like, lighting a cigarette and then, held the match up like, what is this? It's Richard Pryor running down the street. The fact that anybody could be that just brutally honest is funny. The first bit where he talks about when he first had an orgasm and he didn't know what was going on, and he was like thinking like, what the hell did you do to me, woman? And then a half hour later he's like, can you do that to me again? The bit too that he talked about when he dated a Playboy bunny, because he talked about bringing her back to her place, and like one of his lines was, if I don't get that pussy, I can fuck this couch. Which was just... It's
good to have a B plan prior.
Pretty much, yeah. But for me, the best part of this album is when he talks about his trip to Africa. and seeing the people there, like he had one bit like, oh my God, that motherfucker looked like Joe Frazier. God damn. Just how he would do that. But that trip and those observations, the observations of, someone that threw dice in his neighborhood looks like a guy who's a bank president in Africa. And that made him realize that using the N-word like he did was not positive. And that trip caused him to stop using that. And that, they're just brutally funny, brutally honest, but just an absolute classic. I mean, if you are a comedian and you do not listen to this album, you are not doing your job correctly, because this is a master at the height of his craft. She's nodding in silence, folks. Great for a podcast.
Yes, I am nodding in silence because it's Richard Pryor. I love him. It's been a long time since I've heard the album, so I can't give much more feedback than what you've basically given.
Yep.
But, he was in the background of a lot of things. I also really loved him, any work he did with Gene Wilder. So just Richard Pryor, absolute treat. I know I've seen some of his, they've done some of videos of some of his specials too. It's been a minute, but I might have to travel back in time and watch some of those again.
They're on Netflix. This one is on Netflix.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
But yeah, shall I go on to my number 4?
Yeah, what is your number 4?
Well, my number 4, if you guys were looking for a comedy album that is both enjoyable for adults and also doesn't cuss and is actually still really funny, Brian Regan Live. Have you ever heard of Brian Regan?
I've heard of him. I have not heard him.
Oh, this one's a really good compilation. It's jokes about spelling bees and not being good in school, like stuff that almost everybody can relate to, which is awesome because he's talking about him as a kid sometimes, but then other times he's talking about just him awkwardly living through life because that's Brian Regan.
Right.
But yeah, I remember talking about not being good in school and the whole idea of one morning you wake up and your head pops off that pillow because you realize a science thing that was assigned to you months ago is due today. So he just goes outside and gets a cup of dirt and fills it, fills dirt and just turns it into the science fair. And then the teacher comes up to me and goes, "What do you got there, Brian?" "Oh, it's a cup of dirt." well, what's going on with it? "Well, it's a cup with dirt in it. So can you just give me an F and let me go home?" Really good bits about, spelling bees and child awkwardness and even awkwardness as an adult. I love him talking about going through, anytime he went to a gym and the person working there was giving him the tour, he said he felt the little monkey assistant walking behind awkwardly. He's like, "Where are we going, Thunder?" And then he'd be trying to use a piece of workout equipment and somebody would come up and interrupt and be like, "Sir, we need you to get out of the scaffolding."
You sounded like your cat for a minute.
Yeah, so he, that's just barely touching on some of the bits on there, but he's delightful. He actually intentionally doesn't cuss. One of the comedian improv people that I had worked with briefly back in Arizona had gotten to meet him and asked him about that, and it's something that I guess he feels strongly about, and that's why he doesn't have it in any of his material.
And that's good, because I do think a lot of comedians do fall back on swearing when for a quick and easy laugh, when I think if if they learn how to kind of rein it in just a little bit, swearing could be a little more effective, in my opinion. But hey, I'm not a comic, so of course I know everything about comedy.
Yeah, and there's actually, I think even my brother had given a kudos to Brian Regan about but if he threw in one F-bomb, it would be even more funny.
Well, yeah, think about it. I mean, if at some point in the future, for a future album, he did do that, think about, the eruption from the audience that's going to occur. So it's a great little bit to have. So, All right, my number 4. It's a compilation album. Came out in 1988, and if you're going to think of it in any way, think of it like you would the old TV sitcom clip shows, because that's really what this is. It's Monty Python, The Final Ripoff.
Oh, yes, we had that album. My mom hated that we had that album.
Yeah, it's 2 discs, and it, again, really, it's just a collection of anything that your theater friends have quoted ad nauseum about Monty Python is going to be in this album. If you've had theater friends, I'm sure you've had them, and I've had them, that know that every word to the parrot sketch. The parrot sketch is going to be on there.
I was just going to say, this parrot is deceased.
It is no more. It has ceased to be.
It has ceased to be.
My absolute favorite is the argument sketch, because that's like life in retail. Is this the right room for an argument? I told you once. No, you haven't. Yes, I have. When? Just now. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. And it's just that back and forth. The Spanish Inquisition makes an appearance. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. It's. I have to put it up there with my favorite, even though listening to it now, like I mentioned, when you've heard it, if you're involved with theater friends, you're going to hear Monty Python a lot. So I can still think something's funny without necessarily laughing at it today, because I've heard all the jokes before, but it's still something I would recommend. I mean, if you got somebody that doesn't really know Monty Python, this is the perfect thing to put in their lap to give them. This is the complete idiot's guide to Monty Python right here, with some new material for 1988.
I think what I appreciated, because this is one, it's the too, even though this was the sound of a visual bit, I love that it still worked, because that's how awesomely talented those people are, is that they can take away all of the visual bitness and still sell it. And, they probably also selected stuff specifically that would work that way.
Yeah.
But usually stuff doesn't translate that well, and it worked really well in that medium. So
that it did.
It's good album.
All right, what's your last one?
So my very last one, and this one had the one joke that the first time I heard it made me laugh so hard that I cried. I was listening to random comedians come up at my desk at work, and the lady, true story, the lady that sat in front of me stood up, turned around, and oh my God, I thought you were like having an asthma attack or something, because I was trying so hard not to laugh. But the album is New in Town by John Mulaney. Have you heard of New in Town or John Mulaney?
He's the one who did Big Mouth on Netflix, right?
Yes, he does voice Andrew Glauberman on Big Mouth, and that's what he's most known for. He did try to have the John Mulaney show, but it was pretty fucking terrible. As much as I love John Mulaney, I couldn't do it. But this album is really solid, and the joke that I'm referencing, and I will probably post this on our page, is the Xanax story. So if you guys want to look up the Xanax story, John Mulaney, it is the funniest single bit I think I've ever heard. But overall, the album's great. He is an awkward guy just trying his best. I think another really great one on this album where he's at a train station and he sees a woman, like the woman's walking and he's walking behind her, and this woman picks up pace, and he thinks, oh, she must hear the train coming, so he picks up pace after her. And then what turns out is she thinks he's following her, so she starts to run. He starts to run. And then he realizes what's going on only when he backs her into this corner, and she's like obviously like frightened. And he goes, "Oh no, I'm not going to rape you." And he just says that he forgets that like this like points at himself whenever you see that, because it's live too. So this is, it was a live one, but the album's really great. Right. He's like, I forget that this can be scary, because I feel like I am just like a child, like just with like skin problems, something like that's the way he talks about himself. So he's self-deprecating, and I love it. He's awkward, and I love it. He's really funny. So if you haven't checked out any of his albums, New in Town, awesome. If you don't feel like a whole album, give Xanax Story a shot. That's a really good one if you're going to take it away from this.
Yeah, and it sounds like we will have that video up on the Facebook page. So there's that. I will go with my last one here. This album, I would say, it's the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony of comedy. It's the Dark Side of the Moon of comedy albums. It's Rant in E minor from Bill Hicks. Have you ever heard Bill Hicks?
Oh, Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I've heard Bill Hicks.
Yeah, he, speaking of Mitch Hedberg earlier, I had heard that Mitch was heavily influenced by Bill and whatnot, but just everything about this album, I listened, the first time I listened to this, I just sat in awe at everything he came up with, like opening up talking about getting a new show on CBS that he was going to call Let's Hunt and Kill Billy Ray Cyrus. And it's where they chase that jarhead, no talent cracker asshole around the globe until they find him, put a shotgun in his mouth like a big black cock of death, and boom! Then they'll come back next season with Let's Hunt and Kill Michael Bolton. And he talked about, selling it to CBS, that he wanted to rid the world of all these fevered egos. And the guy at CBS said, "Will there be titty?" "Sure." Boom. He's a producer now. He had a great bit about, I was in Australia and I found out they celebrate Easter the same way that we do, by telling the kids by commemorating the birth and resurrection of Jesus, by telling our kids that a giant bunny rabbit left chocolate eggs in the night. And then he said, did a whole bit too about, why not tell kids that, goldfish left Lincoln Logs in your sock drawer. At least that's a more miraculous connotation there. I think the big bit that I really like on there is, he has a bit where he confesses to the audience. And that confession is that anytime the show Cops is on, he has to watch it. He watches it so much that he knows that he could afford a double wide trailer. And, he said the show is the same every night. It's like the cops get called on a domestic disturbance call, probably because the neighbors across the way, could not hear the results of the American Gladiators competition. And they get to the house and the woman's like, "He didn't mean to hit me, officer. He didn't mean to hit me. He's a good man." And everything that he... listen to this album. Like, when I'm not using hyperbole when I say it's the Beethoven's fifth of comedy albums. It's Bill Hicks, by far, is probably one of the most influential comedians of the past 30 years, bar none.
Yeah, he's brought up a lot in the comedy scene. If you ever hear anybody talk about, especially older comics, I almost want to say Louis C.K. even brought him up at one point, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on it. But a lot of those kind of the older comedians, that age group of comedian, a lot of them were inspired by Bill Hicks. I'm not sure if I've actually heard that one specifically, so I might have to get that one and give it a listen, because, why not?
Make sure it's the original. For the past 10 years now, his mother, who's the head of his trust, essentially, has been releasing a lot of old tapes that he had, because Bill taped all of his shows. And so there's a lot of material out there. And they have one called Rant in E Minor Variations, I think is the title, which is just different performances of the same joke. As someone who was a comedian herself, you may like that version of the album because it will kind of show you how he molded it into what became the final album. But look for Rant in E Minor, absolute classic.
Gotcha. See, and that's a good tip for the listeners, too, because it's like, hey, any comedian listeners, you might really like the other one to see how a joke gets formed or how a set gets built. But meanwhile, people who don't give a fuck about writing set bits, or bit sets, whatever, like... They can just go listen to the original and just enjoy. They can cut right to the final product. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, because I view a lot of the new material from his that's being released as just like outtakes being released by a band, and hearing bands sing like a different version of a song that they made famous later. It's great as an artist. It doesn't matter what type of art we're talking about, to see the steps they made to kind of chisel that work into the perfection it became. So there's that. Which leads us to our album of the week. Yay!
Yay!
Album of the week this week was my choice. So I picked one of my favorite Rolling Stones albums, Emotional Rescue. Now, before we get into a track by track here, let's hear your overall thoughts.
So, I think today I learned that I am not what you would call a Rolling Stones fan. I did find it interesting. This album, it almost kind of felt like they tested a lot of types of music in this one. There was some disco inspiration that happened in a few songs that I'm sure we'll point out that wasn't really typical of them, obviously, but also a few others, some reggae and even a little bit of country-ish. So I found that interesting. Overall, not my favorite songs, not my favorite album. I'm not sure how much I've actually listened to the Rolling Stones now that I think about it. Like, you always assume just because you've heard the band, that of course you've heard their music, and I'm like, I'm not sure I've actually listened to much of this, but now today I have, and I've learned, and thank you, Tim. What about you? I mean, this is one that you like, so please go on.
Yeah, I'll put it like this. I fully acknowledge that this album, I mean, they had other albums with stronger songs. This album did kind of suffer from not having a signature tune attached to it. Like the album after this, Tattoo You, had the song everybody knows from the Rolling Stones, Start Me Up, on that album. This album did not have a Start Me Up, which I can see for the casual listener, it's probably why it's not as high up on there, but I love the experimental tone of the album as well. I mean, the previous album they did from this, Some Girls, they challenged themselves to kind of, they were challenged not only by disco, but by punk as well. They wanted to show that, even though they're in their late 30s going into their 40s, they were still the greatest rock and roll band in the world. And, what I've always loved about them is that, yeah, they were more than happy to kind of sample other bits of music and kind of see if they could make it into something that's distinctly them. And, anyway, we'll go through it now, track by track here, and go over our thoughts. So track number 1, Dance Part 1. I'll go with my notes here first. I wrote that it's a strutting song. Every time I hear this, this is really like their Staying Alive from the Bee Gees. Because, every time I hear this and I have ear pods in, I'm strutting a little bit extra. The sax always gets me moving when I listen to this. Bobby Keys, with the sax player for the Rolling Stones, just had a grand time on this album. The guitars I had were kind of low key. They didn't stand out. They were low key, yet they were funky, and they kept the energy going. And they were used more as a support to the horns and the bass. And Charlie Watts on drums, he's not a flashy drummer, but he's one of the most precise drummers that I have ever heard. He always has a steady beat. He never wavers, and that allows the guitarist and the bass player to have a little fun, to kind of find ways to kind of weave into that. So that's why I dug that one. What are your thoughts on Dance Part 1?
So that's what I had. Funk jams. Like, we're starting off with, like what you said, it's not a head bobber, it's more of a head and shoulder motion, but I guess that goes to that strut like you were talking about. But I did find myself doing that because I wasn't walking at the time, but I did find like that, I want to move my shoulders and bob my head to this one. This one, I had a note that I felt a little disco inspired to me, just a little bit, not super prevalent there, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good one to start out to, because it got me moving immediately, and I dug the kind of strutty way. It's strutting into the album, so to speak. They strutted into this album.
There you go, yeah. All right, track number 2, Summer Romance. The notes I had is that I feel dirty for liking this song.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, it's. I have no doubt that Mick Jagger is not a role model for how men should treat women. I also have to acknowledge that he's not necessarily angling for something illegal, but it's a dirty song about an older guy that's dating a girl that's still in school. And take out Jagger, you have one hell of a tight rock song if it's just the music itself. But, sometimes too, this made me think that, kind of like focusing too much on the subtext of a particular song like this would be kind of like talking about the dark subtext of a professional wrestling angle. It just, I could be reading a lot more into this than what's really there. So yeah, the lyrics, icky, but overall the music, you can ignore the lyrics in this case and still enjoy it. What did you think?
So this song, I just put that it didn't really grab me. Maybe because I'm not young enough for him. I didn't have much to say about it. I mean, the music was all right, but I had to go look up the lyrics because one thing just side note, with this song, I found it so annoying that I couldn't find, like, put in this song with the word lyrics and actually pull up a song with the lyrics playing for me to kind of help me. So I had to go and, like, really go out of my way to look up the lyrics on a separate tab each time. But that's just annoyance side note for my personal wanting to vent. But, yeah, but it sounded to me like he was pining over some barely legal booty. And, I don't know, I guess I heard enough of that in like half of the country songs I had growing up. It's just not a message I care about anymore. And maybe that just distracted me so much from the music. I had nothing really to say. It's a song that was there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a strong one, let's put it that way. But yeah, we'll go on to the next one here. Send It to Me. I love the reggae feel, but I wouldn't call it a reggae song, which, you know, kind of speaks to them as musicians. Has a nice slow groove, similar to the previous song. If you focus on the lyrics, you can get a bit creeped out. But also with Jagger's delivery of his lyrics, sometimes you just can't understand what he says, so I can see where some folks may have missed what he was singing about in this particular song. But what did you think?
Yeah, my first note is back-to-back meh songs for me. And it's funny, because, yeah, there's definitely a reggae feel, and I liked reggae. The first album I brought was Esperanto Reggae. Mm-hmm. But just had a meh. But I did find interesting trivia. The reason the song is heavily influenced by reggae is the Stones were big fans of it ever since their introduction to it. They had recording sessions in the 70s, Goat's Head Soup, that was in Jamaica. Yep. And while they were there, they fell in love with reggae. So that was a big influence for why they wanted to play with that style. But I guess for me, it felt like it wasn't them. And maybe that was part of it that was just a little bit off-putting. Like, I don't know, maybe reggae belongs in a reggae album and not on a rock album. But that's IMHO, who the fuck am I to say? Right. You know, this was experimental, and I love the experimentalness. It just, this genre felt awkward to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. Yeah, it had to be. If you are going to appropriate another culture's music, it has to be spot on. And while this was not Vanilla Ice levels of appropriation, they could have put a little more work into it. Now, speaking of the Stones and reggae, if I'm not mistaken, they were actually one of the first big bands that helped reggae artists get attention in the United States. So they were very much responsible for getting people to listen to folks like Bob Marley and whatnot. So not to say that they are 100% directly responsible. There are other things as well. But when you got the Rolling Stones coming out and stating these obscure artists from a country you may have only heard of from people winning vacations there and game shows are making great music, people are going to listen. So, all right.
Yeah.
We'll go to the next one here. Let Me Go. The notes I had, it was a great showcase of harmony work, even though it's Jagger singing with himself. The guitar solo is almost rockabilly-like, and you can tell the 50s and 60s inspiration of it. The chorus is repeated a lot, but with how they sing it, it kind of compels you to sing along with them, and it kind of makes you move. And the sax at the end I put was just filthy and good. I loved it. What'd you think?
So my notes here, this was the point in the album where I was like, oh no, I think I might not be into the Rolling Stones. I actually didn't like the vocals on this one. I don't know what it was about it. I didn't find the harmonizing very enjoyable. I did like the music. It had a really nice rhythm, and I really enjoyed the sax at the end, even though, was there sax throughout the song? Because I felt like I missed it if there was.
I don't recall right now. I don't have everything.
Okay, because I almost re-listened to it, but then I just figured I would just, ask you live. Why not? Because to me, it's just like, oh, and then there's a saxophone. Like, was he just late that day? He just walked on at the very last second. To me, it was kind of funny just to randomly sax at the end. But I could be wrong. I didn't re-listen to it, but it was definitely it hung out more in the end. If it was in the rest of the song, there wasn't a lot of notice to it. Right. But, I was like, the saxophone.
Came out of nowhere. But, yeah, all right. Let's move on then. Indian Girl, I put that it was a weird song, almost pop country-ish. I mean, that was around the time that like Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, Ronnie Milsap were kind of making a bigger splash for country artists than had been previous. So I can see why that influence would be there. The Spanish horns throughout were just corny and goofy, but I thought they were funny. It's weird with some of their songs how ridiculous, if you think about them, the songs really are, yet they're still able to present them as if they're the coolest thing ever. It's a weird thing that they're able to do. And the guitar work I really loved, very country influenced. Keith Richards was actually friends with a noted country rock singer by the name of Graham Parsons, who had a group called the Flying Burrito Brothers in the late 60s, which you'll be forgiven if you haven't heard of them, but they were one of the bands essentially responsible for inspiring groups like the Eagles, that came along later too. But it works for me. I can see though where someone who's not a fan of the Rolling Stones or someone that doesn't know their history working with country may not like it. This is one that you really have to be a hardcore Stones fan to really like. So what'd you think?
I mean, I'll give it. It was an interesting song. I didn't hate it. I kind of agreed with the kind of. I put it was like that lead into the young country time. That's the style it kind of reminded me of, like almost between Dolly time and then what was called like young country, spinning into that kind of twangy feel. I liked the variety of having the horns in there. I'm always down to hear somebody play a new instrument, but it did kind of lose me.
Yeah.
But pretty fucking dark. I mean, nothing says a fun time like a song that talks about soldiers raping girls. But some of the lyrics pretty dark. Little Indian girl, where is your papa? He's fighting in the war in the streets, and all the children were dead except for the girl. Really intense song. And it was funny because, like I mentioned, I had a little bit of an issue hearing him. Mm-hmm. So, but this one was loud and clear. I totally understood these words.
Okay.
So unfortunate that this was the one that I could hear really well.
All right. Speaking of that, let's move on to the next one, Where the Boys Go. It's a rockin' little number. I really dug it. The background vocals really stood out. Makes me want to sing along, even though there's a lot of repetition in the lyrics. If I had to compare it to any song, I kind of, in terms of the sing-along encouragement, it reminds me of like Friends in Low Places, in terms of how the studio recording seems kind of like a party. It's not a memorable song, but it shows how strong they are by taking essentially a C-graded song and making it fun. I did love at the end the back and forth vocals between the men and the women. It was corny, it was cheesy, but it was totally right to do because it was fun. What'd you think?
I have, yay, a rock jam. I was just happy to hear something that I liked again. Just yay, a rock jam. Because, hey, you know what? They're great at rock. Because I will say the ones here that were more rockish, I did enjoy them more. I love the drive of the guitar and the drums. At this point, I really needed a rock song, and it definitely had me moving. It's a foot-tapping, head-bobbing song for sure. It's... Okay. It's fun enough that you'd still want to sing along to it, especially if you're on the hunt for some booty. I bet it's a great bar theme song. Like it did. It felt like the boys are going to go out, and then at the end they find the girls, which is when that back and forth happened that you talked about, which I thought that was cool that they did that. It kind of reminded me, anything you can do, I can do better, like that kind of back and forth thing that got kind of fun with that when you have those dualities. So, right. I mean, it was short-lived. It was the tail end, but I also appreciated that part of it. I thought it was funny.
Nice. All right, that brings us to our next track, Down in the Hole. Notes I had, a dirty, low-down blues number by Masters of the Craft. The guitar work alone, while it's kind of subdued in the mix, is pure emotion. It's the beauty of what blues guitar can bring to rock music. I will not proclaim that it's the greatest blues song ever made, but put it on, you're going to be grooving. And I would also say too, for folks learning how to play the harmonica, this is actually a good song to kind of play along with, to sharpen up your skills. So what did you think of Down in the Hole?
My notes are very blues theme. So far we've hit reggae, disco. I guess it makes sense we take a field trip to the blues if we're going to be experimental. Solid guitar work, and I kind of dug the bluesiness, actually. I guess I don't require only rock from the Rolling Stones. Very chill out, close your eyes, sway to it. I kind of couldn't tell what the song was about. Like, I was kind of in between if it's about someone losing everything and just ending up on the streets, or if it was somehow about war, because it talked about, down in the hole after digging the trenches, looking for cover, and finding out there ain't nobody there, or ain't nowhere to go. Said. And I was like, okay. So I didn't look into the history of the song. I just thought it was interesting that I felt it could have kind of fit both in a way.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, knowing Mick Jagger, it's probably related to sex in some way, for all I know. But, yeah, I don't know the specifics of that, and yeah, it's, like I said, not the greatest blues song in the world, but you put it on, you're going to be jamming. Brings us to our next one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs, the title track, Emotional Rescue. I had that bass line, those vocals, the lyrics. This song shouldn't work, yet it does. They're like pro wrestlers that become their character. This would be fun to dance to. This song, more than anything, makes me think of the times when I was trying to impress the ladies. I wouldn't say perform, but it's like when you are kind of romancing, you're putting on a bit of an act, and that's what this song kind of brought out for me. It's goofy as fuck, I put, and especially the ending, the whole on a fine Arab charger. It's just corny, but the sincerity with which Jagger sings that entire song, even with the Marvin Gaye inspired falsettos, for me, just completely works. What did you think of Emotional Rescue?
The disco vibes are strong with this one. This song, one of the little trivias I was actually able to pull, this song specifically apparently alienated a lot of Stones fans who were concerned that they were selling out to disco. It is the rock song that made the disco top 100 chart, to be fair.
It is what it is.
The only thing I couldn't get into this one was the higher pitched vocals. I will totally throw that at, my ears. Sometimes higher pitched singing just doesn't jive with, it's like a dog whistle type thing. But I really liked the sax, and I didn't mind the music. I felt like that part I could have totally grooved out to. According to Jagger, the song was actually about a girl who's in some sort of manhood problems. Not that she was going crazy, just a little bit screwed up, and he wanted to be there to help her out. So I guess it's like the whole hero complex type thing again.
Yeah, less said about Jagger's sex life, the better. I guess.
He maybe has the thing for victims. I don't know.
Well, I recall a story from Mackenzie Phillips, who has a sad life. But she recalled her father was John Phillips, who was the founder of the Mamas and the Papas, and there's a whole other thing with him and Mackenzie that I won't even discuss on here. But she recalled when she turned 18 at her birthday party, Mick Jagger kind of brought her to a room, locked the door, and said, "I've wanted to do this since you were 10. Yeah. If your facial reaction could correspond into sound.
Oh my god, yeah, it's like, I feel like I should record this just so every now and then can capture my faces, because I've got my camera on one, I've got a second monitor, and then I'll look over and be like, oh, there's a face meant for TV.
Screenshot.
Just the look of horror happening during this. Yeah, so that song is that song. I like the music. I'm not sure I like the message. I didn't really dig the high-pitched vocals.
Yeah, there aren't many people that can pull off the falsettos. Marvin Gaye, the song that inspired this one, got to give it up. Definitely much better, but Marvin Gaye is a better singer.
And absolutely nobody can pull off the line of, I've wanted to have sex with you since you were 10. So...
Yeah. On that note, let's go to the next song.
I'm good at leaving things on positive notes. So the next song...
The next song is called She's So Cold. This song is just so fun. Even though it does get misogynistic at the end, you gotta bring that up. You're having fun before you realize what's going on. The riff is simple yet funky. The lyrics are quite repetitive, but they encourage you to sing along. It was hard to even write these notes for it, because as I was writing these notes, I was listening to the song and I was dancing in my chair. Charlie Watts, again, great work on the drums throughout, but just it's just a fun, funky little song. What did you think?
I put very repetitive, but I dug it. So it's one of those examples of repetitiveness like succeeding. And what's great is when repetitiveness succeeds, that urge of when you hear a song for the first time and you really want to sing along to it, like you can by the end of it. So I will appreciate a repetitive that works.
A good repetitive,
yeah, a good rhythm. It does make you want to move along from the beginning, good guitars and drums. I could have used with something in there to give it a little oomph, though. Like, it just kind of felt like it was... Like, it didn't feel like there was a bridge. It didn't really feel like there was an actual chorus. Like, there was a chorus because it repeated a lot. But the music didn't feel like it had an actual chorus. The music felt like very almost monotone.
Got it.
The whole thing to me. Like, it didn't change much. It got a little neggy there in the end. I never understood the "you can't be beautiful and old" thing. So that was, but I think it was more of a complaint on the coldness than anything. Yeah.
That's what got me more than it, because it's like it's not needed. I mean, it's just at this point, it's just like he's basically telling her that you're gonna be old and alone, and I'm still gonna get laid. Yay. You know?
Okay, I'm sorry somebody turned you down, but you don't know that.
Yeah. We say all this shit. Still a good song. I enjoy it. But let's talk about the last track here. Another one of my favorites on the album. The lone Keith Richards song, All About You. The notes I had. I can understand that some people may not like Keith Richards singing. He's got a unique voice, to put it mildly. But I've loved it from the first day I've heard him, because, he knows how to bring the emotion out with his limited singing ability. He's so emotional, and he works so well with background singers. I mean, every great Keith Richards song has had some amazing background singers that are kind of used as a way to hide his weaknesses, but by hiding his weaknesses, it shows off his strengths more as a singer, which is really good. And just the characters he sings about feel real, adds to the emotion for me. He makes you feel in this song as if you're watching a movie. The sax work in the song was just fucking amazing. I loved it. And it's just a great way to end it. If you're going to end an album on a low-key manner, this is the way to do it. But it does keep kind of the same energy that the rest of the album had. And that piano closing, I really dug that as well. What did you think?
I put very mellow. It was extremely different feel me, but it was a very good album rap track. I enjoyed it for that. I think it was, especially because they were so experimental throughout it, it kind of worked that it didn't sound like it belonged on the album with the song before it, in a way. But I liked it. I liked the mellowness. I enjoyed the piano. I liked the touch of saxophone in there. I totally agree. The backup vocalists, like, you can kind of tell they had a little bit more of that range of talent than your lead vocal, but they complemented rather than overpowered, which is kind of hard to do.
Yep.
I did find just a weird quote, like, in trivia of all of this. It almost sounds like Richards doesn't really know if he wrote the song. Because it says, in an interview, Richards said, that song was hanging around for 3 years. After researching to make sure it wasn't somebody else who wrote it, I finally decided that it must have been me.
Well, you got to remember with him during this time, Emotional Rescue was the first album made after a drug bust that happened in Canada. He was arrested for heroin, and he could have potentially spent many years in a Canadian prison cell, but the judge of his case said that he had to, if he played one benefit concert for a home for the blind in Canada, he'd be off. So Keith Richards was a smart guy and was like, I'm going to do it. But on a positive note, he took that as a sign that maybe I shouldn't do this because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in terms of not getting jail time. In terms of not remembering creating the song, I can see why with the heroin. But also, too, in the 60s, when he created the riff for Satisfaction, it was the middle of the night. And he woke up, he had his tape recorder, and he recorded it, and then went back to bed and then totally forgot about it until a couple days later when he flipped on the recording and then heard what, was ultimately the riff to Satisfaction. So there have been plenty of times where he's written something and not even realized it. So not the first time.
Well, I mean, heroin is a hell of a drug, so.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully he was off that because that's one of those, it's not crystal meth, but it will fuck with you.
Well, but you know what? Commendable he had that wake-up call. Not many artists do, and then a lot of them end up falling prey to it. Yeah. So kind of good on him for turning it around. And I kind of figured there was probably some drugs involved at some point, and that makes sense. But I did not know that the fact that, he got kind of in trouble and did a benefit concert. But, yeah, not many people get that kind of opportunities. So at least he had, a very generous judge.
Generous judge, and, he had the right mindset. He's... it was stupid what he did getting caught. I mean, you can have an argument of whether possession of drugs should be illegal anyway, but that's a different story for a different day. But, at least he did take it as a sign of, you're only going to get so lucky so often. So, but anyway, That's Emotional Rescue. That brings us to an end to another episode.
We did all right.
We did. More auto-tune there, by the way.
Of course.
Yeah. Do you have an idea of what we could be listening to next time?
No, because I was sick all week.
Okay.
And then doing voting. I will say, just to throw this out there, because I didn't earlier, if you guys are still looking for Halloween stuff to do, I did mention that the haunted house that I work with, Deerlandia, them and other haunted houses have been involved in the scare fair. I did get to go there last Saturday. Really good time. The graveyard scene was really cool, and then they end it with some really awesome stuff too. So I can at least offer that if you guys are looking for something fun, and I'll probably get you the link for the scare fair for anybody locally here in Portland that listens to us that feels like taking the drive out there. And vote. That's what I've got. That's all I've got. Take your time. If you don't have mail-in where you're at, take a cheat sheet. You can still take your time and make good decisions, guys. You've got this.
Yeah, take the time to vote. And by taking that time, do your proper research. Don't let the opinions of, talk show host influence your opinion. If you agree with it, fine, but do some research for yourself. It's not that hard. But vote. That's more than anything, that's what we need to be doing today, tomorrow, for the future. We cannot slack on voting anymore because not voting brought this about.
Yeah, and you know what? You may like your favorite stars, and that's cool too, but just because your favorite star endorses them doesn't make it any better than your plumber endorsing them. Just do your due diligence, and you will feel fine with your decisions in the end, even if they're different from ours.
Yeah, or don't be like people that are criticizing Chris Pratt. Assume that somebody is somehow a Donald Trump supporter just because they're not attending a Joe Biden campaign thing that other members of the Avengers cast. And Scarlett Johansson sending that fucking email, I can't believe that. Sent that email.
This sounds like we might have to get it. Maybe we get it into this next week because we didn't this week.
Yeah, that email. She's like, I want to see you, and it's a whole political thing, the jerk. Anyway.
Anywho. Yes, lack of a response is not a response. I know we've kind of been taught that that's not the case. I felt that message has kind of come around a lot, just kind of the snotty, no response is a response. I'm like, well, actually it's not. But anywho, get out there. You guys can have access to so many resources to get this done for yourself. You've got it.
You got it. And with that, we will see you next week. And remember,
it's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside, and when you wake up ready to say, I think I'll make a snappy new day. It's such a good feeling, a very good feeling. The feeling you know that I'll be back when the day is new. And I'll have more ideas for you. And you'll have things you'll want to talk about. I will too. You always make each day such a special day. You know how? By just your being you. Only one person in the whole world like you. That's you yourself. I'll be back next time. Bye-bye.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.